Captain Jake Morrison stared at the screen in front of him. Something was wrong. The numbers didn't make sense. His ship, the Aurora, was supposed to be alone in this part of space, but the sensors were picking up something unusual. "Lisa, come, take a look at this," Jake called out to his chief engineer. Lisa Grant walked over from her station. She was a small woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had been with Jake for 5 years now, and he trusted her more than anyone else on the ship. "What am I looking at?" Lisa asked, leaning closer to the screen. "That's what I want to know. It looks like a signal. A very old signal." The Aurora was an exploration ship. Jake and his crew spent their days mapping new star systems and looking for planets that humans could live on someday. It was quiet work. Boring, even. That's how most people liked it these days. The war with the Krell had ended 30 years ago. Nobody wanted to think about war anymore. Ben Carter, the security officer, joined them at the station. He was a big man with scars on his hands from his time in the military. Unlike most of the crew, Ben had actually fought in the war when he was young. "Is that what I think it is?" Ben asked, his voice tight. "If you think it's a human distress signal, then yes," Lisa replied. She typed quickly on her keyboard, pulling up more information. "It's coming from Nexus Station." Jake felt his stomach drop. Nexus Station was supposed to be empty. The peace treaty with the Krell had created neutral zones where neither humans nor Krell could have military bases. Nexus Station sat right in the middle of one of those zones. The humans had abandoned it years ago. "That can't be right," Jake said. "There's nobody out there." "The signal says different," Lisa said. She played the audio. It was mostly static, broken and corrupted by time and distance. But through the noise, they could hear a human voice. The words were hard to make out, but the fear in that voice was clear. Ben crossed his arms. "We need to report this to Earth Command." "And tell them what?" Jake asked. "That we picked up an old signal. By the time they send someone to check it out, whoever sent that signal could be dead." "Could already be dead," Ben pointed out. "That signal is at least 2 weeks old, maybe more." Jake knew Ben was right. The smart thing would be to report it and let someone else handle it. That's what the regulations said. But Jake had been in space long enough to know that regulations were written by people who sat in safe offices on Earth. They didn't understand what it was like out here. "How far is Nexus Station from our current position?" Jake asked. Lisa checked her screens. "About 6 hours if we push the engines." "Then that's what we do. Plot a course." Ben frowned. "Jake, if we go there without authorization, you could lose your command. If we don't go and people die, I won't be able to live with myself. Set the course, Lisa." Lisa nodded and returned to her station. Within minutes, the Aurora changed direction. The ship hummed with power as it moved toward Nexus Station. Jake went to his chair and sat down. He opened a channel to the rest of the crew. "Attention, everyone. We've picked up a distress signal from Nexus Station. We're going to investigate. I know this isn't what we signed up for, but someone out there might need our help. Stay sharp and be ready for anything." He closed the channel and looked at Ben. "Get your security team ready. I don't know what we're going to find out there, but I want to be prepared." Ben nodded and left the bridge. Jake watched him go, then turned his attention back to the view screen. Space looked the same as always. Empty, dark, peaceful. But Jake had learned not to trust appearances. The 6 hours passed slowly. Jake tried to rest but couldn't. His mind kept running through possibilities. Maybe it was just a malfunction. Old equipment sending out false signals. That happened sometimes, or maybe it was pirates. There were still groups of criminals operating in the neutral zones, taking advantage of the lack of military presence, or maybe it was something worse. When they finally arrived at Nexus Station, Jake's worst fears seemed confirmed. The station was damaged. Large sections of the outer hull showed signs of weapons fire, but the station wasn't destroyed. Someone had attacked it, but hadn't finished the job. "Life signs?" Jake asked. Lisa worked her console. "Scanning now. The station's power is minimal. Most systems are offline." "Wait, I'm getting something. It's faint, but there's definitely life signs. Just one person." "One survivor," Ben said quietly. Jake stood up. Ben, Lisa, you're with me. We're going over there. They suited up in the airlock. The suits were bulky and uncomfortable but necessary. They didn't know if the station still had atmosphere. Jake checked his weapon. He hoped he wouldn't need it, but Ben had insisted they all go armed. The small shuttle carried them from the Aurora to Nexus Station. As they got closer, Jake could see more damage. Burn marks covered the hull. Several airlocks had been blown open. This hadn't been an accident. Someone had attacked this station deliberately. They docked at an airlock that still seemed functional. Ben went first, his weapon ready. Jake and Lisa followed. The airlock cycled and they stepped into the station. The interior was worse than the outside. Emergency lights cast everything in a red glow. Debris floated in the zero-gravity sections, and there were bodies. Not many, but enough. Jake counted 5 as they moved through the corridors. All civilians. All killed by weapons fire. This was an execution, Ben said quietly. They found the life sign in what looked like a medical bay. A man was inside a cryopod, barely alive. The pod systems were failing. It had maybe an hour of power left. Get him out, Jake ordered. Lisa worked quickly, overriding the pod systems. The lid opened with a hiss. The man inside gasped for air. His eyes opened, wild and unfocused. Easy, Jake said, putting a hand on the man's shoulder. We're here to help. I'm Captain Jake Morrison. Can you tell me your name? The man's lips moved. His voice was barely a whisper. Paul Henderson, Doctor? What happened here, Dr. Henderson? Paul grabbed Jake's suit with surprising strength. They know. The Krell know. They found it. The weapon, ancient weapon. They're going to use it. You have to warn them. Warn Earth. Warn them about what? Jake asked. The architects left weapons. Krell found them. 3 installations. They're going to attack. Break the treaty. Kill everyone. Paul's eyes started to close. Data chip. In my pocket. Proof. Show them. Jake found the data chip. It was small, no bigger than his fingernail. He pocketed it carefully. We need to get him back to the ship, Lisa said. He needs real medical care. They moved Paul onto a stretcher and carried him back to the shuttle. As they left Nexus Station behind, Jake looked at the data chip in his hand. If what Paul said was true, if the Krell really had found ancient weapons and were planning to attack, then the peace that humanity had enjoyed for 30 years was about to end. Back on the Aurora, Jake went straight to the communication station. He needed to contact Earth Command immediately. But as he prepared to send the message, he hesitated. Would they believe him? Would they act fast enough? The bureaucrats and politicians had grown comfortable in peacetime. They might think this was a false alarm or a misunderstanding. Jake made a decision that would change everything. His fingers moved across the console, entering an old code that he'd hoped never to use. It was an emergency protocol from the war, one that allowed any military officer to recall the defense fleet if Earth was under imminent threat. The code was accepted. Across human space, a signal went out. A signal that hadn't been sent in 3 decades. A signal that would wake the sleeping giants of war. Jake sat back in his chair and closed his eyes. He had just started something he couldn't stop. Admiral Helen Briggs was working in her garden when the message came. She was on her knees in the Martian soil, carefully tending to her tomato plants. Gardening was one of the few things that helped her sleep at night. The other veterans had their own ways of dealing with the memories. Some drank. Some took pills. Helen grew vegetables. The communicator on her wrist beeped. She ignored it at first. Most messages could wait until she was done with her work. But it beeped again and again. The pattern was specific. 3 short beeps, 3 long, 3 short. Her blood ran cold. She knew that pattern. Everyone who had served in the war knew that pattern. It was the recall code. Helen stood up slowly, her knees protesting. She was 62 years old now. The war had ended when she was 32. She had spent the last 30 years trying to forget the things she had seen and done, and now someone was calling her back. She walked into her small house and activated the full communication system. The message was simple and official. A captain named Jake Morrison had used emergency protocol Alpha 7. The defense fleet was being recalled. All retired officers were asked to report for duty immediately. Helen sat down hard in her chair. Alpha 7 meant one thing. Earth was in immediate danger. But from what? The peace treaty with the Krell had held for 3 decades. There hadn't been a single incident in years. She opened the attached files and started reading. As she read about Nexus Station, about Dr. Paul Henderson, about the ancient weapons the Krell had supposedly found, her military mind started working again. She had fought the Krell for 12 years. She knew how they thought. If they had found ancient weapons, they would use them. The Krell didn't understand the concept of defensive weapons. To them, all weapons were for attacking. Helen looked at her reflection in the dark screen. She saw an old woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but she also saw the admiral she used to be. The leader who had commanded the largest fleet in human history. The woman who had made impossible decisions and lived with the consequences. She activated her communicator and sent a message to Earth Command. "This is Admiral Helen Briggs. I am accepting recall to active duty. Request immediate access to Titan Fleet status reports." The reply came within minutes. Earth Command was in chaos. Half the government wanted to ignore Morrison's warning. The other half was panicking. They needed someone who could take charge. They needed Helen. Within 12 hours, Helen was on a transport heading to the Jupiter shipyards. That's where they had stored the Titan fleet. 12 massive warships that had been built during the darkest days of the war. Ships so powerful that seeing them made people uncomfortable in peacetime. They were reminders of humanity's capacity for destruction. The shipyards were enormous. Helen had been here before many years ago, when they had put the fleet into storage. Back then she had hoped she would never see these ships again. Now she was grateful they still existed. Lieutenant Commander Amy Preston met her at the docking bay. Amy was young, maybe 28. She had been born during the war but was too young to remember it. To her, the Krell War was just history. "Admiral Briggs, welcome aboard," Amy said, saluting. Helen returned the salute. "Status report, Lieutenant Commander. We've been working around the clock for the past 2 days, ma'am. We have engineering teams on all 12 ships. The Valiant, your old flagship, is the furthest along. We should have her ready to fly within 48 hours. 48 hours is too long. We need her ready in 24. Amy's eyes widened. "Ma'am, these ships have been in storage for 30 years. The systems need to be checked and rechecked. If we don't rush this, millions of people might die. I need you to make it happen, Lieutenant Commander." Amy straightened. "Yes, ma'am. We'll make it happen." They walked through the shipyards together. Helen could see crews working on every ship. Most of them were young like Amy, but scattered among them were older faces. Veterans who had heard the recall and come back, men and women who thought they were done with war. One of those veterans was Commander Kevin Shaw. Helen found him working on the Valiant's weapon systems. Kevin was 45 now, but Helen remembered him as a young lieutenant. He had been brilliant with tactics. He had also watched his entire squadron get destroyed in the Battle of Centauri Prime. "Kevin," Helen said quietly. He turned around. His face was thinner than she remembered, with dark circles under his eyes. "Admiral, I wasn't sure I'd see you again." "I wasn't sure either. How are you holding up?" Kevin looked away. "I have nightmares most nights. My doctor says it's post-traumatic stress. He gave me pills, but they don't really help. When I heard the recall, part of me was relieved. At least now I have a reason to feel this way." Helen understood. She had her own nightmares. "I need you, Kevin. I need your mind. The Krell are moving and we need to stop them." "I know. I read the reports. Ancient weapons. Sounds insane. The Krell are a lot of things, but they're not stupid. If they're moving on this, they believe it's real." Kevin nodded slowly. "Then we'd better be ready." Over the next 24 hours, Helen pushed everyone to their limits. Sleep became a luxury no one could afford. The Valiant's reactors were brought online first, their power cores humming to life after decades of silence. Then the weapons systems, the shields, the engines. Problems appeared constantly. A coolant leak here. A computer system that refused to boot there. 30 years was a long time for machines to sit idle, but the crews worked miracles. Amy Preston seemed to be everywhere at once, solving problems before they became disasters. Helen spent most of her time on the Valiant's bridge. It looked exactly as she remembered. The same chairs, the same consoles, the same view screen. She had stood on this bridge when they fought the Battle of New Terra. She had stood here when they signed the peace treaty. And now she was back. Other ships began coming online. The Defiant, the Resolute, the Indomitable. Each one was a masterpiece of human engineering. Each one carried enough firepower to level a planet. The sight of them powered up and ready for battle should have made Helen feel safer. Instead, it made her sad. Humanity had built these machines to kill. Now they had to use them again. On Earth, the arguments continued. Politicians debated whether the threat was real. Peace activists protested outside government buildings. They said humanity should solve this through diplomacy, not war. Helen understood their feelings. She wished diplomacy would work. But she had looked into Krell eyes across negotiation tables. She knew what they respected: strength. Earth Command finally gave her official authorization. Ambassador Claire Davis, the head of the diplomatic corps, admitted that their attempts to contact the Krell had been ignored. Something was happening. The Krell were moving ships and refusing to explain why. Helen stood on the bridge of the Valiant and looked at her crew. A mix of young and old, hopeful and haunted. They were waiting for her to speak. "I won't lie to you," Helen said. "I hoped I'd never have to stand on this bridge again. I hoped the war was truly over. But hope isn't enough. The Krell are moving. They have weapons we don't understand, and between them and Earth stand 12 ships and the people brave enough to crew them." She paused, looking at each face. "Some of you fought in the last war. You know what's coming. The rest of you have only read about it in books. Let me tell you the truth, war is terrible. People die. Good people. Your friends, maybe you, but if we don't fight, everyone dies. So we fight." The crew was silent. Then Kevin Shaw spoke up. "For Earth." Amy Preston repeated it. "For Earth." One by one, every person on the bridge said it. "For Earth," Helen nodded. "For Earth, all ships prepare for departure. We leave in 6 hours." As the crew returned to their stations, Helen looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Krell were preparing their attack. Somewhere out there, Jake Morrison was still gathering information. And somewhere out there, ancient weapons built by a dead race were about to be used again. The Titan fleet had been asleep for 30 years. Now it was awake, and it was angry. Helen opened a communication channel to all 12 ships. "This is Admiral Briggs to all Titan fleet vessels. In 6 hours we depart for the Arcturus Expanse. Our mission is to intercept and stop any Krell military action against human territory. This fleet was built to protect humanity. Today we fulfill that purpose. Briggs out." She closed the channel and sat in her command chair. It felt strange after so many years, but also right, like coming home after a long absence. The Valiant hummed around her, ready for war. Outside, 11 other Titans of steel and fire prepared for battle. The sleeping giants were awake, and they remembered how to fight. The Titan fleet moved through space like a school of metal whales. Admiral Helen Briggs watched from the bridge of the Valiant, as the other 11 ships maintained perfect formation around her. It was beautiful in a terrible way. These ships had been designed for one purpose: destruction. Now they were racing to prevent it. "Time to Arcturus Expanse?" Helen asked. 4 days at current speed," replied Commander Kevin Shaw from his tactical station. "We could push the engines and make it in 3, but we'd risk damage. Keep current speed. I want us ready to fight when we arrive, not limping in on broken engines." While the fleet traveled, Jake Morrison was still near the Architect installation, trying to gather more information. His ship, the Aurora, was not built for combat. It was a science vessel with minimal weapons, but Jake knew they needed to know what the Krell were doing. "We're getting closer," Lisa Grant said from her engineering station. "The sensors are picking up a lot of activity near that moon." Jake looked at the tactical display. Lisa was right. There were dozens of Krell ships orbiting the moon where Dr. Henderson had found the Architect installation, far more ships than should be in neutral space. Commander Ryan Pierce, Jake's tactical officer, counted them carefully. "I see at least 40 warships. Maybe more. That's a full Krell battle fleet." "What are they doing?" Jake asked. "Looks like they're excavating something from the surface. Large cargo ships are moving between the moon and the larger warships. They're loading something onto the battle fleet." Ben Carter joined them on the bridge. "If they're loading weapons onto warships, they're planning to use them soon." Jake knew Ben was right. The Krell weren't patient. If they had ancient weapons, they would want to test them. And the nearest human colonies were only a few days away. "We need to get closer," Jake said. "I want detailed scans of those weapons." Lisa looked worried. "Jake, if we get too close, they'll spot us. We can't outrun a Krell warship. Then we don't get spotted. Can you mask our energy signature?" Lisa thought for a moment. Maybe. If I power down everything except life support and sensors, we'd be almost invisible, but we'd also be defenseless. Do it. The Aurora went dark. Only the most basic systems remained online. Jake felt the temperature drop immediately as the heating system shut down. They drifted toward the moon like a piece of space debris, slow and quiet. For 6 hours they moved in silence. Jake barely breathed. On the view screen he could see the Krell ships growing larger. They were massive vessels covered in angular armor and bristling with weapons. In the last war, one Krell warship could fight 3 human ships. These looked even more dangerous. Ryan worked his sensors carefully, gathering data. I'm getting readings on the cargo they're loading. Energy signatures are off the charts. These weapons use power sources we don't understand. Can you tell what they do? Jake asked quietly. Not exactly, but the energy levels are consistent with directed energy weapons. Very powerful ones. Jake watched as a cargo ship emerged from the moon's surface carrying a massive device. It was black and covered in patterns that hurt to look at. Ancient. Alien. Wrong. That's architect technology, Jake whispered. They actually found it. As they watched, the Krell loaded the weapon onto one of their largest dreadnoughts. Jake could see Krell soldiers moving on the ship's hull, securing the device. They worked quickly, efficiently. They had done this before. Then something went wrong. Alarms started blaring on the Aurora. We've been spotted, Lisa shouted. A Krell patrol ship is heading right for us. Power up. Now, Jake ordered. The Aurora came to life. Lights flickered on. Engines roared. But they were too slow. The Krell patrol ship was already close, its weapons charging. Evasive maneuvers, Jake commanded. Lisa pushed the Aurora hard to the left, dodging the first blast of Krell plasma. The shot passed so close that Jake could see it on the view screen. A ball of green fire that would have vaporized them. Heading for the asteroid field, Lisa said. Her hands flew across the controls. It's our only chance. The Aurora dove into a nearby field of spinning rocks. The asteroids ranged from the size of houses to the size of cities. Lisa flew between them with skill born from years of exploration. But the Krell ship followed, firing continuously. An asteroid exploded to their right, hit by Krell weapons. Debris peppered the Aurora's shields. Warning lights flashed across every console. Shields at 60%, Ryan reported. We can't take many more hits. Ben had an idea. Lisa, can you get us close to that big asteroid on the left? The one that looks like a potato? Why, just do it. Trust me. Lisa guided the Aurora close to the massive, rotating asteroid. The Krell ship followed, still firing. Ben waited until they were almost touching the asteroid's surface. Then he fired their mining laser. It was a weak weapon, meant for breaking up rocks, not fighting warships. But Ben wasn't aiming at the ship. The laser hit the asteroid, creating a massive explosion of rock and ice. Thousands of fragments flew at the Krell patrol ship. The debris overwhelmed its shields and tore into its hull. The ship spun out of control and crashed into another asteroid. Nice shot, Jake said. Thank the mining laser, Ben replied. Though we probably just started a war by destroying that ship. The war already started. We just didn't know it yet. Before anyone could respond, Ryan's console beeped urgently. Captain, I'm picking up a signal. It's from one of the Krell dreadnoughts. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. What are they saying? Ryan listened, his face growing pale. It's a declaration. The Krell Empire is declaring the peace treaty void. They're claiming the neutral zones by right of conquest, and they're giving human colonies 72 hours to surrender or be destroyed. Jake felt his stomach drop. 72 hours. 3 days. That was barely enough time for the Titan fleet to arrive. There's more, Ryan continued. They're announcing their first target. The colony of New Hope. New Hope was one of the largest human settlements outside Earth's solar system. 12 million people lived there, families, children, people who had never known war. Jake made a quick decision. Lisa, plot a course away from here. Maximum speed. We need to warn Admiral Briggs. Already done, Lisa said. The Aurora jumped to faster than light speed. Leaving the Krell fleet behind, as they traveled, Jake sent everything they had learned to the Titan fleet. The sensor data, the recordings of Krell ships, the energy readings from the ancient weapons, and the warning about New Hope. On the Valiant, Helen received Jake's message. She listened to the Krell declaration with a stone face. 72 hours. It wasn't enough time. Can we reach New Hope before the Krell? She asked Kevin. Kevin ran calculations. If we push the engines to maximum, we can get there in 60 hours. But that only gives us 12 hours to prepare defenses. And if we don't push the engines, we arrive after the Krell attack begins. Helen closed her eyes for a moment. Every instinct told her not to risk the ships. But she couldn't let 12 million people die without trying to save them. All ships, this is Admiral Briggs. Push engines to maximum speed. We make for New Hope. I don't care if we have to rebuild every engine afterward. Those people need us. The Titan fleet accelerated. The ships groaned with the strain. In engineering sections across all 12 vessels, crews worked frantically to keep the engines from overheating. Amy Preston barely slept, moving from one crisis to another. On the Valiant's bridge, Kevin looked worried. Helen, even if we get there first, we're outnumbered. 40 Krell ships against our 12. I know the math, Kevin, but we're not going to let the odds stop us. We didn't in the last war. We won't now. The last war almost killed us all. Helen looked at him. The last war ended because we refused to give up. Even when it looked hopeless. Even when everyone said we should surrender. We kept fighting. That's what humans do. We don't quit. Kevin nodded slowly. The fear didn't leave his eyes, but something else appeared alongside it. Determination. Around the fleet, the same conversation was happening. Young officers asked veterans what the war had been like. Veterans told stories they had tried to forget. Some cried. Some laughed bitterly. All of them prepared for what was coming. Helen sent a message to Earth Command. She told them about the Krell Declaration. She told them about New Hope. She asked for reinforcements, but she knew they wouldn't arrive in time. Ambassador Claire Davis sent her own message to the Krell asking them to reconsider. To talk instead of fight. The Krell response was simple. They had talked for 30 years. Now they would act. As the hours passed, the Titan fleet drew closer to New Hope. The colony sent desperate messages. They were evacuating people to underground shelters. They were activating their minimal defense systems. But everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. Jake and the Aurora caught up with the fleet. Helen ordered them to stay behind the main battle line. The Aurora wasn't a warship, but Jake refused. My crew and I will fight, Jake told Helen over the communication channel. We started this by investigating that signal. We're going to finish it. Helen wanted to argue, but she understood. Sometimes people needed to fight even when the smart choice was to run. Fine, but you follow my orders exactly. Understood? Understood, Admiral. The Titan fleet arrived at New Hope with 8 hours to spare. Helen immediately began organizing defenses. She positioned her ships in an overlapping formation she called the Hammer. The space between the two fleets crackled with tension. Admiral Helen Briggs watched the Krell formation on her tactical display. 43 ships against 12. She had faced worse odds before, but that didn't make these odds good. They're hailing us, the communications officer reported. Put them through. The view screen changed to show a Krell commander. The alien was massive, with 4 arms and skin that looked like dark metal. Its eyes glowed red. This was War Master Thexkor, commander of the Krell Armada. Human Admiral, Thexkor said in broken English. You waste time. Colony will fall. You will die. Surrender now. Quick death. Less pain. Helen stood up. War Master, this is neutral space. You're violating the treaty. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences. Thexkor made a sound that might have been laughter. Treaty is dead. Humans had 30 years of peace. Made you soft, weak. We have power of the architects now. You cannot win. We'll see about that. Thexkor's eyes narrowed. I remember you. From the war. You are Helen Briggs, the one who refused to surrender at New Terra. Many of my warriors died that day. And they'll die today too if you don't turn around. Brave words, but words mean nothing. Today we show you true power. The Krell commander cut the transmission. Helen sat back down. Her hands were steady, but her heart was racing. She looked around the bridge.
Kevin at tactical.
Amy monitoring systems. The crew at their stations, all of them looking to her for leadership. All ships, Helen said over the fleet channel. Hold formation. Wait for my command. Let them come to us. The Krell fleet began to move forward slowly at first, then faster. They were confident. Why wouldn't they be? They had superior numbers and ancient weapons that humanity didn't understand. Range in 30 seconds, Kevin reported. They're charging weapons, shields to maximum. Target their flagship. All ships fire on my mark. The Krell reached firing range. Their ships lit up with weapon discharges. Plasma bolts and energy beams crossed the space between fleets. The Titan ship's shields absorbed the hits, but the force was tremendous. "Shields holding at 70%, Amy called out. Then the Krell flagship fired its architect weapon. Helen watched in horror as space itself seemed to tear open. A beam of pure darkness shot toward the Valiant. It didn't look like normal energy. It looked like it was erasing reality itself. "Brace!" Helen shouted. The beam hit the Valiant's shields. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the shields collapsed completely. Overloaded by energy they weren't designed to handle. The ship shook violently. Lights flickered. "Console exploded in showers of sparks. Shields down," Amy reported. "Hull breaches on decks 7 through 12. Emergency teams responding." Helen gripped her chair. For a terrible moment she thought they were finished. The Krell had a weapon that could destroy their shields with one hit. How could they fight that? But then something unexpected happened. The Valiant's backup systems kicked in. New shields, different from the old ones, began forming around the ship. These shields shimmered with a blue-green color. "What just happened?" Helen asked. Amy checked her screens. "It's the adaptive shield system. We installed it during the refit. It analyzes incoming weapons and adjusts its frequency to defend against them. The architect weapon hit us once, but it won't work as well a second time." Helen felt hope surge through her. "All ships activate adaptive shields. Target the Krell flagship. Fire." The 12 Titan ships opened fire together. Hundreds of missiles and energy beams converged on the Krell flagship. The enemy ship's shields held, but they were glowing red from the strain. "They weren't expecting that," Kevin said with satisfaction. "Their intelligence said we'd gone soft. They didn't know we'd upgraded our ships." The battle became chaos. Ships from both fleets maneuvered and fired. Space filled with explosions and debris. The Krell had numbers, but the human ships had technology and desperation. Jake Morrison brought the Aurora into the fight. His small ship darted between the larger vessels, firing its weak weapons at Krell sensor arrays and communication antennas. He couldn't destroy a warship, but he could blind it. "Target that cruiser's sensors," Jake ordered. Ben Carter aimed carefully and fired. The Krell cruiser's sensor dish exploded, leaving it unable to coordinate with the rest of its fleet. Lisa pushed the Aurora's engines to their limits, dodging plasma fire. "We can't keep this up forever. These big ships are going to step on us like bugs." "Then we'll be fast bugs," Jake replied. "Ryan, find me another target." On the Valiant, Kevin coordinated the fleet's weapons. Years of tactical training came flooding back. He saw patterns in the chaos, opportunities in the confusion. "Admiral, I have an idea. The Krell ships are powerful, but they're not talking to each other well. Their formation is loose. If we can split them up, we can take them in smaller groups." "Do it," Helen ordered. Kevin sent orders to the fleet. 6 Titan ships concentrated fire on the Krell left flank, while the other 6 hit the right. The Krell formation began to crack. Ships moved to support their flanks, creating gaps in their line. Helen saw the opening. "All ships push through the center. Break their formation." The Titan fleet surged forward. It was risky. They were diving into the middle of the enemy fleet. But it worked. The Krell ships found themselves fighting in all directions, unable to support each other. But the victory was short-lived. 3 more Krell ships activated architect weapons. Beams of dark energy lanced out, striking human vessels. The destroyer Indomitable took a direct hit. Even with adaptive shields, the ancient weapon punched through. The ship exploded, killing everyone aboard. Helen watched 300 crew members die in an instant. She wanted to scream, to cry, but she couldn't. She was the Admiral. She had to keep fighting. All ships focus fire on any vessel charging an architect weapon. Take them out before they can fire. It became a desperate race. The Krell would charge their ancient weapons, and the human ships would try to destroy them before they fired. Sometimes the humans succeeded. Sometimes they didn't. Another human ship, the Resolute, was hit. It didn't explode like the Indomitable, but it was badly damaged. Half its crew died. The survivors fought to keep their ship in the battle. Amy worked frantically to keep the Valiant functioning. Every hit damaged something. She had repair teams all over the ship, fixing what they could and abandoning what they couldn't. "We can't take many more hits," Amy told Helen privately. "The ship is holding together, but barely. How long can we fight?" "Maybe an hour. Maybe less." Helen looked at the battle display. They had destroyed 12 Krell ships, but 31 remained. And the humans had lost 2 ships with 4 more heavily damaged. The math wasn't in their favor. Then Lisa Grant made a discovery that changed everything. She was analyzing sensor data from the Aurora when she noticed something strange about the architect weapons. "Jake, look at this," she said, pulling up energy readings. "Every time the Krell fire one of those ancient weapons, there's a massive power spike in their ship's reactor. And right after the spike, there's a brief moment where their shields fluctuate." Jake understood immediately. They're vulnerable when they fire the weapon. For about 3 seconds, yes. Their shields drop to almost nothing. Jake opened a channel to the Valiant. "Admiral Briggs, this is Captain Morrison. I have critical tactical information." Helen listened to Lisa's explanation. Her eyes lit up. "Can you share those sensor readings with Commander Shaw?" "Sending them now." Kevin received the data and ran calculations. "Admiral, if we can coordinate our fire, we can exploit this weakness. But we need to hit them in that 3-second window. It requires precise timing. Then we'll be precise. Send the tactical plan to all ships. Tell them to hold fire until the Krell charge their weapons. Then we all fire together." The plan was risky. It meant letting the Krell charge their weapons without interference. But it was the only way to hurt them badly enough to turn the battle. A Krell dreadnought began charging its architect weapon. Helen could see the energy building up on her sensors. The ship was targeting the Valiant. "Hold," Helen said calmly. "Hold." Kevin's hands were shaking. "Admiral, they're going to fire." "I know, hold." The Krell ship fired. The beam of dark energy crossed space toward the Valiant. Helen's ship dodged at the last second, the beam passing close enough to overwhelm one shield generator. But the ship survived, and in that moment all 12 Titan ships fired at once. Hundreds of weapons hit the Krell dreadnought in its moment of vulnerability. The ship's shields failed. Its hull cracked. Its reactor overloaded. The explosion was massive. The Krell dreadnought tore itself apart. The blast was so powerful that it destroyed 2 nearby Krell cruisers and damaged 3 more. The remaining Krell fleet hesitated. They had just watched their strongest ship die. War Master Thexkor was on that ship. The Krell command structure was in chaos. Helen pressed the advantage. "All ships full assault. Don't give them time to reorganize." The Titan fleet attacked with renewed fury. Without their War Master, the Krell couldn't coordinate. Ships began trying to retreat. The humans hunted them down. Jake and the Aurora found a Krell cruiser trying to flee. "Ben, target their engines," Ben fired. The Krell cruiser's engines exploded. It drifted helplessly in space, but victory came with a terrible cost. 2 more human ships were destroyed. The Defiant and the Courageous both gone in flashes of light. The remaining ships were... The days after the battle were harder than the battle itself. Admiral Helen Briggs walked through the corridors of the Valiant, seeing the damage everywhere. Burn marks on walls, sealed bulkheads where hull breaches had been, and the empty bunks of crew members who would never return. She stopped at the medical bay. It was full of wounded. Some would recover. Others would carry their injuries for life. A young engineer named Danny Cooper was lying in a bed, his left arm gone from the elbow down. "Admiral," Danny said when he saw her. He tried to salute with his remaining arm. "At ease, Cooper. How are you feeling?" "Better than I look, ma'am." "The doctors say I'll get a prosthetic. Should be as good as new in a few months." Helen sat down next to his bed. I'm sorry you got hurt." Danny looked confused. "Sorry? Ma'am, we saved 12 million people. I'd give my other arm if I had to. That's what we signed up for." Helen wanted to tell him that no one should have to give anything. That war was terrible and the cost was always too high. But Danny was smiling despite his pain. He was proud of what they had done. Who was she to take that away from him? "Get some rest, Cooper." "That's an order." "Yes, ma'am." Helen continued her walk through the ship. She visited every section, talked to every crew member she could. They all said similar things. They were tired, hurt, scared, but they were also proud. They had stood against impossible odds and won. Lieutenant Commander Amy Preston was in engineering, supervising repairs. She had dark circles under her eyes. Helen doubted she had slept more than a few hours since the battle. "Status report?" Helen asked. Amy looked up from her work. "The Valiant is spaceworthy, but barely. We need at least 3 months in a proper shipyard for full repairs. The other ships are in similar shape. The really damaged ones will take even longer. And the indomitable, defiant, courageous, and resolute?" Amy's face fell. "Gone, Admiral. We recovered some of the bodies, but most were lost." Helen nodded. She had written letters to the families of every crew member who died. 4,312 letters. Her hand had cramped after the first 100, but she kept writing. Every person deserved to have their commander acknowledge their sacrifice. On Earth, the reaction to the battle was mixed. The government declared it a great victory. Parades were planned. Medals would be given, but there were also protests. People asking why the fleet had fought instead of negotiating, demanding to know why so many had died. Helen received orders to return to Earth and give testimony before the council. She wasn't looking forward to it. Politicians always wanted simple answers, but war never had simple answers. Before leaving the battle site, the fleet held a memorial service. All the surviving crew gathered in their respective ships. Helen spoke over the fleet-wide channel. We are here to honor those who fell in the Battle of New Hope, 4,312 men and women who gave their lives so others could live. They came from Earth, Mars, Luna, Europa, and 100 other places. They were engineers, gunners, pilots, medics. They were friends, lovers, parents, children. Helen paused, gathering her emotions. Some people will say they died for nothing, that we should have found another way. But I was there. I saw the Krell fleet. I heard their demands. There was no other way. These people died defending the innocent. There is no higher purpose. She looked at the names scrolling on her screen. So many names. We will remember them, not as statistics, not as casualties, but as individuals who made a choice. They chose to stand between darkness and light. They chose to fight when running would have been easier. They chose duty over safety. To the fallen, Helen said. Across the fleet, thousands of voices responded. To the fallen. Jake Morrison stood on the Aurora's small bridge during the service. His crew of 20 had all survived, though Ben Carter had a broken arm and Lisa Grant had burns on her hands. They had been lucky. Jake knew it. After the service, Jake received a message from Earth Command. They wanted him to return to Earth too. He was being called a hero, the captain who discovered the Krell plot and saved humanity. Jake didn't feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had stumbled into a nightmare and barely survived. What are you going to tell them? Lisa asked. The truth. That we got lucky. That we should have seen this coming. That the Krell aren't going to give up. You think they'll listen? Jake laughed bitterly. No, they'll hear what they want to hear. That everything is fine now. That we can go back to normal. But normal was over. The Krell had shown their hand. They wanted war. The ancient weapons were just the beginning. And even though the humans had won one battle, the war was far from finished. Commander Kevin Shaw sat alone in his quarters on the Valiant. The battle was over, but his mind wouldn't stop replaying it. Every decision, every lost ship, every death. His therapist back on Earth had warned him that returning to combat might break him. Kevin had thought he was stronger than that. He was wrong. The nightmares were back, worse than ever. In his dreams, he watched the Indomitable explode again and again. He heard the screams of dying crew members over the communication channels. He saw the Krell weapons tearing through shields like paper. There was a knock on his door. Come in, Helen entered. She looked as tired as he felt. I wanted to check on you. I'm fine, Admiral. Kevin, I've known you for 20 years. Don't lie to me. Kevin's shoulders slumped. I'm not fine. I thought I could do this again. But every time I close my eyes, I see people dying. People I ordered into danger. Helen sat down across from him. I see them too. I see all of them. The ones from this battle and the ones from the last war. They haunt me every day. How do you live with it? By remembering why we fight? Those 4,000 died so 12 million could live. That doesn't make their deaths less tragic, but it gives them meaning. Helen leaned forward.
Kevin, you saved lives at that battle.
Your tactical plan turned the tide. Without you, we would have lost. And 4,000 would still be alive. No, we'd all be dead. And the Krell would be attacking New Hope right now. You made hard choices. That's what command means. Kevin wanted to believe her, but the guilt was like a weight on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The Titan fleet began its journey back to Earth. The trip took 2 weeks. During that time, news reached them about political debates on Earth. Some politicians wanted to decommission the fleet again. They argued that keeping these weapons of war around would only invite more violence. Other politicians wanted to expand the military. Build more ships. Prepare for total war with the Krell. They saw the battle as proof that peace was impossible. Helen hated both extremes. The fleet shouldn't be decommissioned. The Krell weren't going to stop. But building more weapons wasn't the complete answer either. Humanity needed to be smart, not just strong. When the fleet arrived at Earth orbit, they were greeted by crowds and cameras. Jake Morrison found it overwhelming. His face was on every news screen. People wanted to shake his hand, thank him, treat him like a celebrity. "I hate this," Jake told Lisa as they left their ship. "You're a hero, Jake. People need heroes. I'm not a hero. I'm just a captain who got lucky. Sometimes that's all heroes are. Lucky people who made the right choice." Helen's testimony before the council lasted for 3 days. Politicians asked her the same questions over and over. Why didn't you negotiate? Why did so many die? Could this have been avoided? Helen answered honestly. She explained that the Krell only respected strength. That negotiation was impossible when one side had already decided on war. That the deaths were tragic but necessary. On the third day, Ambassador Claire Davis testified. She explained how her diplomatic team had tried for weeks to contact the Krell after Dr. Henderson's warning. The Krell had ignored every message. They had been planning war the entire time. Finally, the Council made their decision. The Titan fleet would remain active, but with a new mission. They would be Explorer Defenders, ships that could conduct scientific research but also respond to threats. It was a compromise that satisfied almost no one. At least they didn't decommission us, Kevin said when he heard the news. Yet. Helen replied, "Give them a few years of peace and they'll try again." Jake Morrison received his new assignment in a private meeting with Earth Command. He was being given command of a new ship, the Pathfinder. It was state-of-the-art, designed specifically to search for architect installations before hostile powers could claim them. "You want me to hunt for ancient weapons?" Jake asked. "We want you to find them and secure them. The Krell proved that these weapons exist and are incredibly dangerous. We can't let them get more." Jake agreed to take the mission. He was allowed to choose his crew. He immediately asked for Lisa Grant as chief engineer. She accepted without hesitation. Ben Carter agreed to be security chief. Commander Ryan Pierce signed on as first officer. To his surprise, Lieutenant Commander Amy Preston also requested a transfer to the Pathfinder. Helen approved it immediately. "Why do you want to leave the Valiant?" Jake asked Amy. "Because I spent the entire battle fixing things that were breaking. I want to help find solutions before the shooting starts. I want to prevent wars, not just survive them." Jake understood. He felt the same way. 3 months later, the Pathfinder launched from Earth. It was smaller than the Titan ships, but faster and better equipped for exploration. The crew was a mix of scientists,